Why you keep starting over and how to stop. You keep starting over because your desire isn't backed by a definite purpose. Without a clear vision, your actions scatter like leaves in the wind. Discipline, not motivation, is the bridge from dreams to achievement. Burn the boats. Commit so deeply that retreat is no longer an option. Decide now with unwavering faith, and persistence will carry you through. 1. Lack of definite purpose leads to repeated resets. 2. Emotional decisions without clear commitment fail. 3. Discipline outlasts motivation every time. 4. Fear of failure keeps you looping back. 5. Success requires burning all bridges to the past. The reason you keep starting over again and again isn't because you're weak, lazy, or cursed. It's because you've never taken the time to define a definite purpose, one that burns so fiercely in your heart that it makes quitting unthinkable. You drift, you dabble, you test the waters, but you never fully dive in because your mind hasn't locked itself onto a target so specific, so vivid, that it becomes your obsession. When there's no definite purpose, the winds of life toss you around like a leaf caught in a storm. You try this path for a while, then that one, and just when progress begins to show, you doubt yourself, get distracted, or feel lost, and back you go to square one. And it repeats over and over until frustration swells, confidence withers, and all you have left is a string of false starts and what-ifs. But let me tell you this, no man or woman ever climbed the mountain of success by wandering. You don't stumble into greatness, you decide upon it, declare it as your mission, and then devote every ounce of your being to its pursuit. That's where it begins, with decision. Not wishful thinking, not vague hopes, but a conscious, determined, relentless decision to build your life around something that truly matters to you. A definite purpose is more than just a goal. It's your North Star. It's the fire that fuels your persistence when results are slow, when critics doubt you, and when your own mind whispers lies about your worth. Without that purpose, your efforts become shallow and your energy scattered. You hustle today, then hesitate tomorrow. You sign up for a course, then ghost your own ambition halfway through. You start the business, then shut it down at the first sign of struggle. You get motivated by a video, but the very next morning you're back to scrolling, searching for your next fix of inspiration instead of taking real action. You keep resetting because the path you're walking doesn't answer your soul's deepest question, why does this matter to me? When your why is vague, your results are vague. But when your purpose is so clear that it robs you of sleep, when the thought of it wakes you up before the alarm clock, when it lives in your bones, that's when everything changes. That's when you stop starting over because now quitting isn't even on the table. Now, you've declared a destination, and even if storms come, you move forward because you know exactly where you're going. Clarity breeds consistency, and consistency over time breeds power. But here's the thing most never realize. Defining your purpose isn't about finding it like it's hidden under a rock somewhere. It's about choosing it. You pick a direction and then pour your life into it. You decide what matters to you, what you're willing to trade your time, your energy, your comfort, and your excuses for. And once that decision is made, everything else becomes noise. You don't have to try every opportunity. You don't have to start 5 projects at once. You simply align everything in your life with your one true aim, and in doing so, you eliminate the biggest cause of starting over: confusion. Confused minds don't act with power, but minds fixed on a purpose move with force, with clarity, and with an unshakable sense of direction. Look back at your life. Think about all the times you started with energy, but ended up back where you began. Chances are your reason for starting wasn't deeply rooted. It was based on hype, pressure, or fear, not passion, vision, and purpose. That's why it collapsed. That's why you burned out. That's why you gave up. But once you build a foundation around a purpose that reflects your highest values and deepest desires, you'll notice something radical. You stop caring about the timeline. You stop quitting because now you're not chasing a quick win. You're building a legacy. And legacies aren't built in weeks. They're built brick by brick with patience, with perseverance, and with the stubborn refusal to let temporary setbacks define your path. Now, people will ask, but how do I find my purpose? And here's what I say: stop waiting for lightning to strike. Get still, get quiet, look at your life and ask yourself what makes you feel alive. What would you fight for even if no one clapped? What problem do you feel born to solve? What outcome would make your life feel meaningful, no matter what it cost? Once you get honest about that, your purpose will begin to form. Not overnight, not in a flash of divine revelation, but through reflection, trial, and the courage to pursue what sets your soul on fire, even when the path is steep and uncertain. And here's the real beauty: once you commit to that purpose, the need to start over vanishes. Why? Because even if the method changes, the mission stays the same. You're no longer hopping from plan to plan. You're refining your approach, not restarting your life. You may pivot, you may fail, you may even fall flat on your face. But you won't abandon your purpose because now your identity is tied to it. You see yourself as a person on a mission, and that self-image becomes a powerful anchor during the storms of doubt. You no longer seek validation or quick dopamine hits. You no longer measure success by how fast it comes. You measure it by how aligned you are with your purpose, by how committed you remain when the applause dies down, and by how determined you are when no one's watching. That's when the shift happens. That's when the cycle of starting over ends, when you stop chasing random goals and start committing to a destiny. And that's when people will look at you differently. They'll wonder how you became so focused, so grounded, so unstoppable. They won't see all the inner work, all the tears, the sweat, the doubts you had to push through, but you'll know. You'll remember the day you decided to stop dabbling and start deciding. That was the turning point. That was the day you put down the restart button and picked up the tools of purpose. That was the day everything changed. So if you're tired of starting over, then stop living by default. Stop living by distraction. Choose your purpose. Declare it boldly, write it down, speak it out loud. Let it become your reason for saying no to anything that doesn't fit. Let it guide your time, your energy, your relationships, your habits, and your thoughts. The moment you do that, the fog will lift. Your excuses will lose their grip. And instead of waking up with regret, you'll wake up with direction. And isn't that what we're all truly after? Not just a life of movement, but a life of meaning, driven by something bigger than a mood or a moment. That's what purpose gives you, and once you've got that, you won't need to start over again, because now you're on your way, and nothing can stop a person who's finally found their path and refuses to turn back. The truth most people don't want to face is that emotional decisions, no matter how exciting they feel in the moment, are not strong enough to carry you through the valleys of difficulty unless they are tied to a clear, unwavering commitment. And that's exactly why so many folks keep starting over. You get fired up by a video, a quote, a conversation, or a late-night wave of passion, and suddenly you're ready to change your whole life. You're writing goals, making plans, signing up for challenges, telling the world this is your time. But deep down, there's no real commitment behind it, just a burst of emotion that feels good in the moment but lacks roots to hold fast when storms roll in. You see, emotion is fleeting. It spikes and crashes like a wave, and if your entire journey is built on that unstable energy, then failure isn't just likely, it's inevitable. Why? Because as soon as things get hard, and they always do, as soon as the excitement wears off, or people stop clapping, or results come slower than expected, The same emotional high that launched you disappears, and you're left stranded, wondering why you don't feel inspired anymore, and suddenly starting over feels easier than pushing through. But here's the thing, those who win in life don't rely on emotion, they anchor themselves in decision. They make a vow with themselves that no matter how they feel tomorrow, next week, or next month, they're going to see this thing through. They remove the option to quit. That's commitment. That's the invisible contract that separates the doers from the dreamers. You cannot build a lasting life, a strong business, a powerful body, or a fulfilling relationship on emotional whims. You need a foundation, something deeper than mood, something stronger than temporary hype. It's easy to commit when the sun is shining, when everything is going your way, when the crowd is cheering. But what happens when the sky turns gray, when motivation is nowhere to be found, when your efforts go unnoticed? That's the test. That's where commitment proves its worth, because a committed mind doesn't care about how it feels. It only cares about what it said it would do. Emotional decisions without commitment are like fireworks. Bright, loud, exciting, but gone in seconds, while real commitment is like a candle. It may not explode with drama, but it burns steadily, consistently, even when the wind tries to blow it out. Look around you, look at your own life. Think of how many things you started because of a burst of energy but abandoned when the fire cooled, that gym membership you swore would change your life, that online course you paid for but never finished. That book you were going to write, that business idea you were so sure would make you rich. All those things began in emotion, but died from a lack of commitment. And this pattern continues until you do something radical, until you shift from chasing emotional highs to building disciplined habits. Until you say, I don't care if I feel like it, I'm doing it because I said I would. Until you decide that your word, your promise to yourself, is worth more than any passing feeling. The people you admire, the ones who seem unstoppable, they didn't build that life on hype. They built it on habit. They didn't succeed because they always felt like it. They succeeded because they showed up when others stopped, and that's the part no one claps for, the quiet work, the unseen grind, the days when everything inside says, skip it, and you answer, not a chance. When you commit, truly commit, your emotional state stops being the dictator of your actions. You don't ride the roller coaster of motivation. You build tracks and you stay on them one day at a time. You don't negotiate with excuses. You don't wait to feel ready. You just move, because commitment means this isn't up for discussion anymore. The goal is non-negotiable. The effort is automatic. And here's the wild part. Once you actually do this, once you stop restarting and start honoring your word through thick and thin, your confidence soars, not because things got easier, but because you finally became someone you can trust. That's where true power lies, in self-trust, in knowing that even on your worst day you'll still take the step. Even when the goal feels far away, you'll still put in the reps. And when that becomes your identity, you don't have to rely on hype anymore. You're not chasing motivation because you've become consistent. The very thing you used to envy in others, their discipline, their progress, their result, starts becoming part of who you are, not because of luck or talent, but because you stopped playing games with your potential. You stopped making emotional decisions and started making identity decisions. You started acting like the person you said you wanted to become, and no, it won't be perfect. You'll mess up. You'll have bad days. But the difference is, you won't throw everything away every time your feelings shift. You'll adjust, recover, and keep going. That's the power of commitment. It gives you staying power, the ability to ride the waves without drowning in them. You won't keep quitting when it gets tough. You won't keep walking away at the first sign of resistance. You won't keep saying, I'll start again Monday, because Monday never really comes. You'll live in decision, not delay. And that's when your life begins to change, not when you feel excited, but when you feel tired and you still act, when you feel doubt but still choose faith, when you feel weak but still keep your promises. So ask yourself, what have you decided emotionally but never committed to fully? What dream keeps falling apart because you haven't drawn the line in the sand and said, "This is who I am now, no turning back"? You've got the power to stop the cycle, you've got the strength to follow through, but it won't happen until you stop letting emotions lead and start letting decisions guide. Feelings will pass, the thrill will fade. But your choices, the ones you make with full awareness and responsibility, will either carry you forward or trap you in another loop of starting over, and you're better than that. You've got what it takes to stick, to build, to grow, but only if you anchor your journey in something more solid than hype. That something is commitment. And once you make that shift, once you decide that your goals deserve more than just a temporary burst of interest, you'll no longer be the person who keeps starting over, you'll be the one who finishes. There's a reason why so many people feel like they're on a treadmill, running hard, sweating, trying, and yet never getting anywhere. And it's because they're relying too much on motivation, which is a slippery, unreliable thing that comes and goes like the wind, instead of building the one quality that never betrays you, discipline. For while motivation might get you started, only discipline will keep you going when the spark fades, when the results are slow, when no one's cheering, and you're left alone with your goals and your excuses fighting for control of your next move. And here's the truth most never grasp. Success is not about how excited you feel on day 1. It's about what you do on day 100. When the excitement has worn off and all that's left is the quiet grind of repetition, the early mornings, the late nights, the tiny decisions made in private that no one sees but which shape everything about who you become. And that's where discipline steps in, not as a punishment, but as a form of freedom, because when you are disciplined, you're no longer a prisoner of your mood. You've built a system that carries you through regardless of how you feel. You don't have to wake up every day wondering, do I feel like it today? Because the answer is always the same. It doesn't matter how I feel, I made a decision, and I honor that decision with action, and that action becomes your habit, and your habit becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your destiny. And that's why the people who rely on motivation keep starting over. They're constantly chasing a feeling, waiting for the perfect moment, hoping the stars align, thinking that if they just get fired up enough, they'll finally take action. But what they fail to understand is that action isn't something you do only when you're inspired. It's something you do regardless, because you've trained yourself to show up no matter what, and that kind of consistency only comes from discipline, not hype, not emotion, not some magic quote or a 2-minute pep talk, but real, raw self, leadership that kicks in when no one's watching and no one's clapping, and everything inside you says, skip it. But you go anyway, and that kind of strength builds over time like a muscle, and at first it's hard, yes, because your brain is used to comfort, used to delaying, used to excuses, but the more you act in spite of how you feel, the stronger you become, and eventually the scale tips. The person who once quit becomes the person who doesn't know how to quit, and it's not because they found better motivation, but because they built unshakable discipline. And that's what separates the great from the average, the finishers from the starters, the legends from the almosts. And let me be clear, discipline is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about showing up even when the conditions aren't ideal, even when you're tired or frustrated or uncertain. And it's in those moments, the ones where you could easily justify quitting, that your future is being written, not in the loud declarations, but in the quiet decisions, in the early alarms you actually get up for, in the workouts you do when no one else is around, in the work you produce even when inspiration is nowhere to be found. And that's why the most successful people you see are often not the most talented. Not the most gifted, but the most disciplined. They keep going, keep building, keep repeating the process, and eventually they arrive where others gave up, not because they were lucky, but because they were loyal to the process. And this is the shift you must make if you want to break free from loop of starting over. Stop worshiping motivation and start honoring discipline. Treat discipline like your closest ally, your internal compass, the part of you that keeps promises to yourself when your feelings try to talk you out of it. Because feelings are fickle, they change with the weather, with your energy, with what someone said about you online, but discipline doesn't flinch. It's the same on good days and bad. It doesn't need applause, doesn't need permission, it just moves forward. And if you're serious about achieving anything real in your life, you must build that kind of internal power, because no matter what you want, a business, a healthy body, a better future, it's going to require repetition, and repetition is boring to the undisciplined, but it is sacred to the committed. It is the path to mastery, and the more you practice discipline, the less you rely on willpower, because your habits start to carry you, and your environment begins to reflect your decisions, and over time, you evolve into someone others look at with awe, saying, "How does he stay so focused? How does she stay so consistent?" And the answer isn't sexy. It's discipline, plain and simple, the ability to act regardless of mood, to push regardless of results, to trust the process even when the payoff hasn't shown up yet. Because you know that if you plant and water and wait, the harvest always comes, and so you stop seeking quick wins, you stop needing outside validation, and you start building from within, laying brick after brick even when it feels slow, even when it feels quiet, because discipline knows that the slow work is the real work, and the people who rise in life are the ones who stop chasing highs and started chasing growth. And growth, my friend, is rarely comfortable, but it is always worth it. So today you have a choice. Continue living by how you feel or rise above and start leading yourself with discipline, the kind of discipline that shows up when it's inconvenient, that says no to distractions and yes to progress, that outlasts every burst of excitement. And if you build that discipline, if you nurture it, protect it, sharpen it, then you will finally stop starting over, not because life got easier, but because you became stronger, and that's what it's all about. Not perfection, but progress through persistence, through patience, and through the quiet, powerful force of discipline that outlasts every fleeting emotion and every shallow excuse. There's a hidden addiction that most people never talk about, a craving that quietly sabotages their progress and keeps them stuck in the illusion of movement, and that addiction is this. They're addicted to the starting line, obsessed with the feeling of beginning, hooked on the rush of new goals, new plans, new declarations, always chasing that intoxicating energy that comes from saying this time will be different. Because let's be honest, starting feels good, doesn't it? It gives you a hit of dopamine, a surge of purpose, a burst of excitement that says, I'm doing something with my life. And for a moment, you feel alive again, but the danger in this addiction is that it convinces you progress is being made when in reality, you're just circling the runway, never taking off, and you know it deep down. You've built vision boards, made schedules, downloaded apps, bought planners, told your friends, yet here you are again, starting over, and it's not because you're lazy or broken, but because your brain has been trained to crave the start more than the journey, and that's a deadly trap, because the starting line is not where greatness is found, it's where it's tested, and the real growth, the real change, happens in the middle, in the mess, in the boring, gritty, ordinary days where the novelty wears off and all that's left is effort without applause. And that's where most people run. Back to the beginning, where it's still shiny and clean, where there are no scars yet, no setbacks, no fatigue, just a blank slate full of possibility and none of the pain of commitment. Because let's face it, being at the starting line feels like potential, and potential is safe, it's beautiful, it's pure, but it's also empty if it never gets fulfilled, and so the cycle repeats. Start, no follow through, and every time you quit, You validate this identity of someone who begins but never finishes, who talks more than they act, and over time, your belief in yourself erodes, not because you're incapable, but because you keep breaking the promises you make to yourself. Moment the excitement fades, and that's the true cost of this addiction. It's not just the wasted time or missed opportunities, it's the damage done to yourself, trust, and once that trust is gone, it's hard to believe in any future you paint for yourself, no matter how bright. But here's the good news: you can break the cycle, you can wean yourself off the high of beginning and fall in love with finishing, but it starts by telling yourself the truth. That you're not addicted to progress, you're addicted to the illusion of it, and it's time to stop falling in love with day 1 and start showing up for day 50, day 90, day 200 when no one cares anymore, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, because that's where winners are built, not at the beginning, but in the follow-through, in the repetition, in the boring parts, and you must become the kind of person who is not seduced by novelty but committed to mastery, who doesn't need a fresh start every time things get hard but doubles down, digs in, and finishes what they began. And this shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small, consistent actions that teach your brain to value momentum over motivation, to celebrate progress over perfection, to stay instead of flee. And the moment you stop chasing the rush of the new and start chasing the strength of completion, your life will begin to change, because the truth is, the person you want to become is on the other side of boring consistency, not thrilling beginnings. And while everyone else is resetting their goals, redesigning their planners, or dreaming up the next big thing, you'll be too busy doing the work, stacking the wins, collecting the proof that you're not who you used to be. And it won't always be exciting, but it will be worth it, because you'll finally break the pattern, finally walk past the starting line and keep going, keep growing, and keep finishing. And that's when you become powerful, not when you start, but when you refuse to stop. The hard truth that most people don't want to admit, the truth that separates the few who rise from the masses who repeat the same patterns over and over, is this: your breakthrough, the moment everything changes, the result you've been chasing, the shift in your life you desperately want. It doesn't come wrapped in excitement or fanfare or some magical surge of inspiration. It comes after the boredom, after the repetition, after the grind that no one claps for. And this is where so many fall off, not because they lack talent or desire, but because they misinterpret boredom as a sign they're on the wrong path, when in fact it's the clearest signal you're getting close, because what's actually happening is your brain, wired for novelty and stimulation, starts to resist the very repetition required to achieve mastery. And instead of pushing through that resistance, most people give in. They start over, change plans, chase a new goal, convince themselves they're pivoting, when really, they're escaping the very process that would have set them free. And if you want to win, truly win, you must stop running from the boredom and start seeing it as the sacred gateway to everything you've ever wanted, because greatness is boring before it's brilliant, it's dull before it's dynamic. And every champion, every master, every legend you've ever admired has spent years doing the same things over and over, refining their craft, repeating their routine, getting so good through consistency that the outcome became inevitable. And yet here we are, in a world addicted to quick fixes and overnight success, where people quit the gym after a week because it's not fun anymore, abandon their dream because it feels stale, walk away from their commitments because they don't feel inspired. When the truth is, the work you do when it's boring is the most important work of all, because it's in those moments that your character is forged, your identity is shaped, and your future is built, not when you're excited, but when you're exhausted, unmotivated, and still show up anyway. And let's be real, anyone can take action when it's new and thrilling, but only the truly committed keep going when the feelings fade. And that's why success is rare, not because it's impossible, but because people quit right before the miracle, right before the breakthrough, right when it's starting to work. but hasn't bloomed yet, and they don't even realize how close they were because they mistook silence for failure, when really, the silence was just the world waiting to see if they were serious. And so the key, the real secret, is to train yourself to love the repetition, to find power in boredom, to understand that when things get monotonous, you are not lost, you are leveling up. And what's required in those moments is not more motivation, but deeper purpose, stronger discipline, and unshakable faith in the process. Because your life will never rise above your ability to stay consistent when it's hard to care, and that consistency doesn't just build habits, it builds proof, and that proof becomes belief, and belief becomes momentum, and momentum becomes mastery, and once you reach that point, where your actions are no longer dependent on how you feel, but are simply part of who you are, you become unstoppable because you've now crossed over from effort to identity, from trying to becoming, and that's the point most never reach. Not because they couldn't, but because they bowed out too soon, distracted by the next shiny thing or discouraged by the slow pace. And so the invitation is simple, but not easy. Stay when you want to quit. Repeat when you want to switch. Trust when you want to doubt, because on the other side of that boredom is your breakthrough, and it's not going to announce itself. It's not going to feel magical. It's going to feel ordinary, like another day of doing what you said you would do, and then, suddenly, without warning, you'll look up and realize you've become the person you once only dreamed about. Not because of one big moment, but because you refused to let the boredom win. You refused to be swayed by emotion. And instead, you honored the process, every step, every rep, every small decision that most would have skipped, and now you stand where they never will, not because of luck or gifts or timing, but because you understood what most never learn. Boredom isn't your enemy, it's the final test before your breakthrough, and if you pass it, everything changes.